Well, we are back with the Zay Builds podcast. This is where we talk all things building, the good, the bad, and everything we can do better. My goal is simple, to give real insight into construction, to sit down with designers, builders, tradies, suppliers, anyone connected to this industry or just passionate about what they do, and share their stories, their challenges, and their wins. Because let's be honest, construction isn't easy. It's tough, it's unpredictable, and sometimes it can feel like everything is against you. But it's also one of the most rewarding industries there is. And when it's done right, it is awesome to work in. That's what this podcast is all about. Talking about what works, what doesn't, and how we can all do better. Having real conversations, not corporate ones. Breaking down the barriers between builders, clients, and the system, and finding a better way forward together. I love hearing people's stories, I love this industry, and I love seeing people passionate about what they do. Look, before we jump in, do me a quick favor. Hit that subscribe button, leave a review, share it with a mate. It really helps get these conversations out there and keeps the momentum going. All right, let's jump into it. Today, I'm sitting down with someone who plays a massive role in Canberra and how it grows. But before any of that, he's a person with a story, a purpose, and a passion for Canberra. Chris Steel is the ACT Treasurer, Minister for Planning, Sustainable Development, Transport and Heritage. But titles don't tell the full story. I want to talk about who he is, why he chose politics, what drives him, and then dig into the real stuff that affects every builder, developer, tradie, and homeowner in Canberra. This is not a debate. It's a genuine conversation. Chris, really good to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks for making time in your busy schedule.
Yeah.
First of all, mate, can we start with what got you into politics?
Well, I've worked in and out of the ACT and Australian governments in the past, but had also worked for like a peak body lobbying government around changes to policy, particularly in the social policy areas around education and health policy, for example. But really wanted to get involved in the actual decision-making process, making the decisions and being involved in making the decisions myself as a member of parliament. So I'd always been involved in politics from when I was at university, but really had an interest in policy making, but wanted to be involved in the actual decision-making. But I now get that opportunity as both a member of the Assembly and as a member of Cabinet, not just on matters within my own portfolios, but as a decision maker across all of the portfolios, because Cabinet has a collective decision-making responsibility.
Well, when you're at school, was there something that you're like, oh, that's what I want to do?
Yeah, look, during high school, I sort of decided I was interested in politics. I'd sort of been following it through the news. And decided to actually pursue that through at college. So there was a political science program at Narrabundah, and I thought, I'll get involved and see what that's about. Went there and studied it, was really interested, and then pursued that at university as well.
Did you do debating at school?
I wasn't a debater,
and
I'm still not the best public speaker, so I probably would have benefited from that, to be honest.
I would definitely disagree with that. I've seen you present to massive rooms full of people and talk for 40 minutes straight, and you've absolutely smashed it. And I was sitting there half the time going, I don't know how he does this. That is so impressive.
When you do it often enough, you sort of lose your inhibitions, and it becomes a bit easier. But I think in terms of like delivery and that sort of stuff, there are better orators than me in the Legislative Assembly.
Yeah. I think you're underselling that, because some of the stuff that you talk about, I think it was the NBA one actually, where I was just like that like you just were bang, 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 bang. Is that like, what do you do to prep for that?
Well, I think like when you're engaged or immersed in the policy and all of the information all the time as the responsible minister, you kind of come to know things pretty well.
Yeah.
And when you're having multiple conversations, multiple events where you're talking about the same subject matter, it does come a little bit more
Naturally.
easily.
Yeah.
And, you're not afraid of having, a bit of a debate as well with people. People have different views, and you can have that discussion respectfully. And, you learn. I've been now in politics just under 10 years, so it's a reasonable experience to be able to build up. Not everyone has that from day one. Takes a bit of time. So, I've been in the role now, and I'm pretty settled in terms of being able to build up those skills.
Yeah. I was thinking about this on the drive into work actually this morning. There's some people that say that, politicians need to have real world experience. I sort of I don't know if I agree with that. I sort of tend to think that, like, I wanted to be a carpenter and I wanted to be a builder, right? And it seems like you wanted to go into politics.
Yeah.
And like, I think I'm a professional. You're definitely a professional at what you do.
Yep.
So I think that, like, you need to have a specific set of skills to go into politics, if that makes sense. And you can't sort of just change the ship halfway through and then think you're going to be a good politician, if that makes sense.
Yeah, look, I think we want people of all different experiences in the assembly. I think that is really important to have good decision making. We want people with experiences from the construction industry, for example. Like, that would be a valuable asset to have, particularly when we're debating, important matters around regulatory reform in the construction sector. We want women. We've now got a parliament that has majority women, which is fantastic. We want to have experiences from all walks of life, and I think we've done that reasonably well in a small assembly. But there's always further work that we can do. We probably could have more multicultural representation. That's something that I think we can improve on, for example, to better reflect our population. But we do need people in there with genuine experience. Lawyers often get criticised for going to politics because that's where a lot of politicians come from, that background. But we are making laws for the territory as well, and so having that background can help. But things can be picked up on the job as well, just like in any other role.
Yeah. Do you think lawyers go into it because they just know the lingo and they know the speak, or
possibly? And maybe they've been in a background where they've seen legislation, they understand the sort of policy intent behind it, and might want to get involved. But look, lawyers are often accused of holding things up rather than getting things done as well. So sort of, I'm not saying every lawyer is like that, but having a range of experiences certainly helps. And that really is where politicians will focus on different things depending on where they've come from and their values. So having a mix helps us to get a balance in the parliament rather than just focusing on one particular need of the community and not another.
Yeah, so having an eclectic bunch, if you want to call it that, really provides, that's where the magic happens essentially, because you've got all different people that think differently and you can all come together and have a good discussion around what needs to happen.
Yeah, and sometimes that experience might come from another political party, and there's been actually quite a bit of respect over the years for people who have come with genuine experience. People respect that and will listen to them when they speak up about a particular issue, and so I think that's been really good for sort of cohesion of the assembly and addressing some of the challenges that we've had to face. Yeah.
Was there someone that you looked up to in the early years where you were like, that's sort of a role model of mine?
Yeah, look, I think it's a bit of a cliche, particularly in the Labor Party, which is the political party that I'm from, that Paul Keating is that person, particularly because he was such a reformer in terms of the economic reforms that he led. He was someone that, as I was growing up, I certainly sort of noticed his approach to politics. He's quite progressive, but at the same time was leading economic reforms to improve the way that our market works. And so I think as a sort of market-based reformer was someone that was quite inspiring. And now that I've taken on Treasury, it's probably had a little bit more meaning for me, noting that obviously he was at the federal level and there are very different challenges facing the states and territories at our level of government.
I was just about to mention, you've got a lot of different directorates that you look after.
Yeah.
Did you accidentally leave your hand up when they were getting out of the hard jobs, or what happened there? Because it seems like you go through it. You're treasurer, you're the Minister for Planning, Sustainable Development, Transport, and Heritage. Like that's a massive job.
It's the nature of a small government is that there's only a certain number of ministers, and we do need to have multiple portfolios and take on that responsibility. But there's benefits to that because I can see the linkages between the portfolios and try and bring those departments together to actually address a particular vision that we've set out. At the moment, the benefit of having the Treasury as well as planning and transport is really beneficial in tackling housing supply.
Well, they work hand in hand, don't they?
Yeah, and we have only a limited number of officials in a small government to be able to work on these projects. So to be able to sort of focus the resources on government on tackling that issue has been really important. And so planning is a dream portfolio for me. In terms of the impact that it can have over the long term in shaping a city that is a great place to live. But that has to go hand in hand with transport, because we need to make sure that to build new housing, people are well connected in with particularly public transport, but also road transport and freight to access commercial areas and great places to walk and everything like that. And then Treasury sort of brings that policy element and funding as well for some of these initiatives, but the policy element and also taxation policy. So how do we actually encourage the sort of development that we'd like to see in the city? So, and of course, the benefit of building new housing and supporting the construction sector to get on and do more things helps grow the economy, which is obviously the focus that I have as treasurer as well. So all of them work together really closely, and it's great to have them all together and be able to draw some of those linkages and pursue common goals.
They're all big jobs though. How do you deal with that on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, look, it is challenging, and getting the sort of balance of family life. I've got a young daughter who's about 2 years old next March, and balancing that at the same time as some of the other jobs is a bit of a challenge. But we have the benefits in the ACT as well as we're in one location. It's effectively a city state. I don't have to go on massive amounts of travel like federal parliamentarians have to do, and so we try and manage as best we can, but there's a fair bit of support that I need from my family to do that, including my grandparents as well as my daughter's grandparents as well as my partner.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. It is a juggling act though, isn't it? I love Canberra. Yeah. I absolutely love it. What keeps you motivated about what you're doing?
I think just the role that I have is incredibly interesting. I get to see everything that's happening around the city in all different areas: health, education, housing, all of those areas, transport. And often I get to see what's happening before anyone else does in the public when we're presented with plans and those sorts of things. So every day is different. There are challenges that are thrown up unexpectedly that have to be managed. So there's always something to keep me engaged, interested, and working hard. So it's definitely a role that it's not for the faint-hearted, or those that can't contribute the time. But it's one of those jobs that it'll be the honour of my career to have. And I think every day is there's something different and it's interesting, and that's what I love about it. Every time I see
you speak, that passion shows through. It just shows how much you love what you do. As a builder, when you're driving around, right, you might drive past the house you built or something like that, and you go, "Yeah, I built that." Yep. When you drive around the city, do you drive past things and go, I okayed that?
You touched on a sort of subject because a lot of politicians I've seen around going, I built that. It's like, well, you didn't literally build it. Actually, someone else did from the construction industry. But obviously, there are always multiple hands in getting things done, whether it's supporting funding for a project that gets it off the ground. But what I have realised is that everything is built in partnership, and that we need to absolutely work with our industry partners to get things done. Particularly, I've had a lot of responsibility in delivering infrastructure in the city, and that's been, that's a lasting legacy for the city. Things like the light rail extension that's underway to Commonwealth Park, for example, things that will benefit the city for decades to come. But there's hundreds of people involved in that project, and they can all be proud that they've contributed to the city. But actually leaving something physical behind, I really get that and understand it. I think it's, to be able to shape our city in that way is quite unique, and that's what the construction industry really delivers for our city.
Definitely. Just on the tram, I think Canberra has a bit of a love-hate relationship with the tram. And when I say that, I mean that we hate when it's being built, but after it's been built, everyone's like, oh, it's actually pretty good. Like our Christmas party on the weekend, coming up this Friday, we've built it around the tram coming into the city from Gungahlin. So we start there and we're jumping on the tram.
Oh, right, the pub crawl.
The pub crawl, that's
fantastic.
It. Yeah,
right.
So, good. I think that, the full plans for the tram, I think once it's in effect, everyone will be like, that's awesome.
Yeah.
But there's a bit of frustration, obviously, when it happens and everyone seems to get upset. But that's part of it. You know?
Yeah, there's a fair bit of disruption in the city at the moment, and that's because the line is actually going directly through the city. The rest of the line down to Woden, the future extension 2B, is largely confined to the median strip. So we're hoping that won't sort of significantly impact on businesses during construction. It'll still have its own, road closures and some temporary arrangements in place, but it's just this particular moment in our city's history with that going on, plus the theatre work going on, and some private development next door on the Court car park all together. It's a reshaping of the CBD. It's part of a long-term vision, but it's very disruptive in the short term.
No pain, no gain. That's what I'm going to say.
Yeah.
I like that all this stuff's happening though, because you looked at other capital cities around Australia and this is what happens. Yeah. And it is way better. I want there to be a stadium as well. If you can put that down, maybe. Yeah. That'd be good.
We're working on plans for it. Can't do everything at once. I know. As treasurer, I'm trying to just manage the pipeline to make sure that it's all deliverable and sustainable. But the city is also just reaching a point in its history where some of the infrastructure is starting to age, but also the population's grown to a point where we need additional infrastructure. A second hospital is one of those infrastructure projects that we need to deliver on the north side as well. So it's about politics is a lot about priorities, and it's just trying to work out which ones we need to do first. It's not to say that we won't do some things altogether. It just might take a little bit longer.
Yeah. Do you feel responsible for the growth of Canberra, improving housing, planning and transport? Is that...
I feel...
You are responsible for it. But...
Well, I feel the responsibility every day, and there's, when we're making decisions, we try to do it based on the best evidence available, the advice of some pretty experienced group of people within ACT government. But we also need to listen to the broader industry and what they're saying about what we need to do as well. And I think where we've actually had some real success in reforms is where it's often come from the construction industry saying, hey, we've got this problem that you could resolve really easily. Let's get onto it. And we've had to, it's taken a little bit of a culture change in the government to go, hey, actually, let's prioritise this because they're saying this is an important thing. It is a bit of there's a lot of responsibility, long-term planning as well. We're talking about shaping the city over the next sort of 50 to 100 years, not just sort of an immediate short-term fix as well. So it's trying to just think across that larger timescale.
I think it's important to think long term, because if you get short-sighted and you're not thinking about what's next or what could be, that's where you can get tripped up and make in construction, we don't have the full plan to start with. It's very hard to start building something. Yeah. So obviously the same deal, right?
Yeah, proper planning and design is important. And we've tried to embed that into a lot of our projects where we've had issues in the past, particularly in ICT delivery, which is a big focus at the moment.
What's that?
So this is around just with everything digitising, there's more things that are going online.
Oh, yeah.
And needing to, with new ICT platforms that need to be built, having more time at the beginning really helps to make sure those projects are delivered properly.
What does a better Canberra look like to you?
I think, at the moment, the priority is on housing, and we are well known as a livable place. We've got access to great quality services, but as our population has been growing, we're reaching a point where we need to deliver more housing, and we can't do that through the sort of, I guess, the urban sprawl of the past, because we're hitting the nature reserves, we're hitting literally the borders of the ACT. And we need to find new ways of delivering housing. The fundamental tenet of a livable city is actually having a place to live, a home, a shelter. That is now out of reach for many young people who simply can't afford to get into the housing market. And there has been, I think, in the last 2 years, a real recalibration of government around this central task of building tens of thousands of more homes, not just to meet today's population, but the future population ahead. I'm responsible for the production of population figures in Treasury, and we know that we're going to reach 700,000 by 2050. We're about to hit 500,000. So to be able to house an additional 200,000 people, like we have to start looking at every aspect across government to achieve this task. And of course, you've got to think more than the housing. It's all the infrastructure required to support the housing and the people in it, as well as existing residents. And we don't want to lose what we love about Canberra either. And I think that's part of this is if we don't change, we are going to lose what we love about Canberra in terms of its livability, and that requires more housing. It requires more infrastructure investment in health, schools, hospitals, community facilities.
What do you think we love about living like the Canberra? Like what?
Yeah, it's like for me, it's the quality services. People know that they can go to the hospital, emergency department, and get seen within a reasonable point of time. High quality healthcare. They get a good education in public schools, and there's a range of great private options as well. The access to green spaces and recreational amenity that people have, all those things, the tree-lined streets, all of those sorts of things.
I'd say the ease of getting around as well. Like you can pretty much get to anywhere in Canberra in 30 minutes.
Well, exactly. From a transport point of view, like it really is, has been the past a 15-minute city. It's now it's probably 30 minutes now. We want to retain. We don't want to face the same problems that other cities face in terms of congestion, where they haven't built the infrastructure required to be able to support the efficient movement of people and goods. We need to do that.
You see some horror stories on A Current Affair where they build a new suburb and then there's like one road in and out, and then it's just chockers.
Or the strip development on the Hume Highway that you see on the way into Sydney, and the same thing in Melbourne.
That's what you're trying to avoid.
Yeah, I think we want to have great places that are accessible. And that does mean we need to change the way that we think about the city as being a city of predominantly single detached dwellings, and town centres where there might be some multi-unit. We've got to look at actually densification, gentle densification. So not doing high rise in the suburbs.
Yeah, not towers in the suburbs.
But gentle densification, missing middle housing, typology,
more
townhouses, terraces,
multi-res,
that sort of thing. And there are benefits from that as well in terms of making the local shops more vibrant, supporting local businesses, and then in terms of having more density on the transport corridors, supporting improved services on the transport corridors, whether that's more frequent rapid buses or a light rail stop that will actually service the existing population, but also the new residents as well.
Walter Burley Griffin's plan was sort of to have these little towns everywhere, and then connected obviously by the city in the very middle. So that pretty much what you're doing is exactly to the plan almost.
In fact, we're drawing from Griffin's legacy in a plan that we're developing at the moment for the southern gateway of the city, which is basically Adelaide Avenue, Yarra Glen Drive, down to Woden, where the future light rail stage 2 extension will be going. We're developing a land use plan, drawing on some of the principles that and landscape design that Griffin envisaged for that corridor. Now, his plans didn't stretch as far down to Woden, but they went along Adelaide Avenue, and it was about providing more housing density close to the transport connections. And he actually had planned for what he called streetcar line, but which is light rail, along Adelaide Avenue. And so I think there's some things that haven't been realised yet that we can actually draw from his plans, and we'll be going out for consultation next year on that. We've already done a bit of that work on what we call the Northern Gateway, so Northbourne Avenue, Federal Highway, and there's some zoning changes that are currently out at the moment to increase the density. Not high rise, but like 6-storey, 7-storey apartment dwellings directly next to those light rail stops, so that people don't have to rely on a car to get around, and will hopefully then reduce congestion on the road network.
You make things easier, and you're sticking true to the plan essentially. And I think it's really good that you made the clear definition that we're not looking to build high rises in the little. It's just making things, around these smaller town centres. So more people can live there. So the older couple that still like the suburb, that have the massive house, on the 1,000 square metre block can downsize and someone else can move into there with a bigger family, say. That's the idea, right?
It is, because I think they're like, and at the moment, those people who want to age in place in their own suburb, they don't have an option to downsize, because effectively over the last few decades, we've prohibited townhouses and terraces from being built in what we have in our RZ1 zones, which is the predominantly basically only allowed single detached dwellings. And so that will change with some missing middle housing reforms that have now been progressed to one of the final stages to the Legislative Assembly that's considering this in an inquiry at the moment. We hope to have those implemented around the middle of 2026 to start enabling people, whether it's mum and dad investors building dual occupancies or even a tri-occupancy, subdividing their block. So actually,
I like the sound of all this.
If they've got underutilised land, so they might, if you're an older couple, they might want to stay in the house that they've got, but they've got this massive backyard that they could actually subdivide off and sell to a young family to build a new home. So we'll allow that for the first time, as well as some slightly larger townhouse developments as well. Block consolidation, so bring two blocks together that might be able to not just support sort of 4 dwellings, but actually with the blocks consolidated could support 5 or 6. Those sorts of opportunities will be available for the first time. And again, nothing over 2 stories, not a huge, not huge high rise, but gentle density, still keeping, 45% of the block would be for the house.
Yeah.
The rest would be for, landscape, all of those sorts of things, canopy cover. So still keeping what we love about the city, but having more housing as well.
Yeah, I really like that. What's brought that on? You talked about missing middle a lot.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk on that for a second?
Yeah,
well, you just did essentially. You just explained exactly
what
missing middle is.
It's just so it's the critical missing piece, I think, in the city's development, and we've seen quite a number of large apartment blocks being built in the town centres, and that's because it's been permitted. Now that's only been a relatively recent thing over the last 10 to 15 years that we've seen that sort of development happening. But it's been the tall 24-storey townhouse, 24-storey apartment blocks in the town centres, and then the single detached dwellings in the suburbs. And there hasn't been anything in between, except in certain pockets around some of the shopping centres. And so that's now proposed to change with these reforms, which are probably the largest change we've made to the territory plan, which is our sort of land use zoning plan since self-government. So they're pretty substantial, and there is an opportunity for community to comment on that at the moment and actually say whether they support it. I think it's really important for the construction industry, because when we think about the future growth of the city, there just aren't going to be as many new greenfield suburbs to build single detached dwellings for the industry. So they're going to have to pivot. They'll still do some of that stuff, but they'll also need to think about, well, how can we contribute within existing suburbs by building dual occupancies, tri-occupancies, terrace houses. So there's an opportunity for a sort of new industry to emerge around that, and existing operators to start working in that space.
Yeah, so we're running out of land in Canberra is what you're saying?
Yeah.
And we need to just densify in the centre a bit more.
Yeah, land's becoming more scarce. It's just hard to find, and we're looking at all of the opportunities. Like, that's part of my job. Is I literally pore over maps on a daily basis, often asking the planning directorate to look into particular blocks of land and whether we can release it, whether it's for a community facility or housing or commercial. There just aren't the opportunities anymore, and the blocks that are left are often they've got contamination issues. They've got habitat that we need to protect. It's becoming harder and harder to find blocks that are actually developable, and so we have to look at existing blocks and doing more with them, but also at the same time wanting to make sure that development's sustainable and not losing the character of the city.
Yeah, so we can't just go around and put another 5 Denmans, Coombs and Molongalos in. That's basically it?
Yeah, like we've got sort of in Gungahlin, we've got the next stage of Jacker and Kenny. That's it.
Yeah.
Gin and Dairy, there's still some further development there, including potentially across the border, which will be good. So West Belconnen, and then Molonglo. We've got Molonglo Town Centre, and then these new suburbs of Bandler and Salmon across the road from Whitlam, and then potentially 1 or 2 additional suburbs just to the south of them. Other than that, there's not a huge amount of opportunity for new development. We're doing some investigation on what's called the Western Edge, but large tracts of that have strong environmental values that need to be protected. So it's going to be pretty limited. And so we're going to need to look within the existing footprint. And look, Canberra is a really spread out place. We can't spread out continually forever across the border. So it does make sense to look at, well, what can we do internally in a way that sort of makes sure that the development is sustainable and supports, a place that's still easy to move around. And that's where transport-oriented development comes in, shop top and shop adjacent development, particularly around what we call the group centres, which are sort of medium shopping centres around Canberra. There are about 14 of them. And then some of the local centres as well.
Yeah. Lots happening. Lots happening.
Yeah.
It's overwhelming sometimes to think about all of this. What do you do on a day-to-day basis? You just one thing at a time.
Yeah, look, I have a series of briefings every week with particularly with the planning directorate, with Treasury, and with transport around these issues. And we're trying to weekly have a certain focus on a particular area. There's only so much that we can do at once, and so part of it is just prioritising the work that we have and doing it in tranches. But there's a lot of planning reform just happening around zoning. Missing middle's one, but there's going to be a lot of changes around transport-oriented development coming. We're also just mindful of the community's ability and the construction industry's ability to engage with those reforms, because we want input into those, but we know people working in the construction industry have day jobs, they're working on projects, and so part of it is just giving enough time and opportunity to have input in as well.
Well, let's get into that. You've just come out with a media release, and I think it's fantastic. It's the construction productivity agenda, was it?
Yeah.
What's the real goal behind that?
The idea of this is to streamline planning and building processes so that we can build more things sooner, but particularly housing. One of the things that we've been doing to try and deliver on our housing goals, which is to enable 30,000 new homes by 2030, is to look at all elements of the planning and building system. So we're doing a lot of work on zoning reform, because that will enable more homes to be built in areas where they were previously prohibited, or a certain type of housing was prohibited. But we've also been doing work on land release, finding new blocks of land to release for new housing. But we've also heard directly from industry, including yourself, around some of the challenges that you have in both navigating the system and also with the system itself creating barriers to development, or it's simply taking too long for development to move through the system, whether it's the planning or the building systems or both.
Yeah. Where I got to was that you just need a bit of help. I think you want to, you're motivated to get these 30,000 homes built, and being a builder, that's fantastic, and I want to help that happen.
Yeah.
I feel like sometimes today everyone's so government and us over here, rather than going, let's work together and let's just talk, and then we can solve the problems, move forward and get stuff done.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, there's been a whole range of things raised, and we've had to achieve this housing goal. We really do need to look under the hood of what's currently happening. So we've got new leadership in the what's called the City and Environment Directorate, which is the new major directorate that took in the Transport Director and the previous Planning Directorate and merged it into one, which is really helpful because both of those entities were kind of working in silos before on various matters in the planning system. And so we brought them all together, and they have been doing a job, an exercise in mapping out the planning and building systems, which is across 2 floors of one of the department's buildings in Dixon. It is that long.
This is Dave Peffer, isn't it? Yeah.
And examining each individual decision-making process and each team that's working on it and going, does this process add value to the system? Is it, in fact, creating a barrier to the system and getting things built? And the important thing is everyone's working on the overarching vision that we want these 30,000 new homes, which is literally a goal that is printed on top of this,
Is it?
this exercise. So everyone knows what we're trying to achieve. And so the first job was to map it out, and now addressing each part of the system, working out how we can streamline it. Now, we also need to be mindful that we don't want to lose building quality, and we don't want to degrade the environment, all of those sorts of things. But there's been a whole range of things that we've discovered through that process that we could be working on and streamlining. And then what we've heard from industry through this productivity agenda is a whole range of different issues that they're coming up against. And many of them, there's no ideological problem, with addressing it. It's just something that we need to work through and get a fix. And that could be where it's a change to regulation, or it might even just be a change to an internal process, how the directorate currently assesses something. So we're working on all those changes and trying to bring them together. And it's not going to be all done at once, but it'll be done in sort of tranches and stages over the next couple of years. And we've announced stage 1.
You've just mentioned, we spoke about it a little bit, a bit of a shift in the culture in there at SED.
Yeah.
Because I think when we spoke earlier in the year, my thing was that when I call up and I'm going to try and talk about an application, or I want people to be motivated to approve it and sort of be on my side to be like, yeah, let's get this and just do this and just change this and then we're good to go.
Yeah.
Have you driven that change in there, or have you?
Well, I think that setting the goal and that sort of vision around the 30,000 homes has been incredibly helpful, because everyone knows where we want to be and what we're trying to achieve. And so there has had to be a cultural shift. And that's going to have to be ongoing to get the directorate in a place where it does see itself as working with industry to achieve that outcome. The job of people in the planning directorate isn't to stop development from happening. It's to make sure development can proceed, but obviously in a way that meets all of the objectives of the territory plan and the government's broader policies. So there's a range of things that, quite frankly, exist in the system that don't sort of drive towards those objectives. And part of that has been the work that we have to do is identify what those are, and whether it's remove them altogether or modify them so that we're all going towards that one goal of achieving more housing at the moment. But it could be a range of other things as well, more commercial development or whatever, more community facilities or whatever it may be. And so it's a huge amount of work that we're going through at the moment. And some of the things aren't particularly sexy reforms. Like they're pretty really some minor technical adjustment, but that might have a massive difference on a builder that's trying to get something done.
Well, great. I've noted here grey water. You've made that optional. I think that's a big one.
Yeah.
Well, it's very minor in the grand scheme of things, but plumbers are going to absolutely love that.
Yeah. So the Muster Plumbers Association came to government as part of this productivity agenda and said, look, our plumbers have been putting in these grey water systems since the Millennium Drought, when a very well-intentioned requirement was put in that every new home should have a grey water pipes installed, not connected, just installed in case someone wants to connect a grey water system to it. So that has been in place now for a couple of decades. But what they said was, anecdotally from our plumbers, they reckon only around 20 of these grey water systems were ever connected to the pipes. But we've been installing these pipes at a cost of around $1,500 for every build. We don't think this is actually adding value. It's actually increasing the cost of building new homes. It's giving our members work. Like they've got extra work that they can do, but it's also potentially causing some other risks, plumbing risks as well. So we've accepted that as one of the changes we'll be making under stage 1 of the construction productivity reforms. And the idea will be to remove that requirement altogether. People can still voluntarily put in a grey water system, but it'll be up to them, and if they want to put in have the cost in a new bill. But we're not going to require it of every single home that's built.
I think I owe you an apology as well. When I heard that you wanted to build 30,000 homes, I laughed initially. Yeah. But when I reflect on that now, I think it's unbelievable leadership from you. I think that you putting that target up and it's just motivated everything and changed everything. and got people going. And I think, you know, that was masterstroke. So congratulations there. And I think looking at all the stuff that you've done this year, you've been very busy. And so you're definitely motivated to make this happen. Do you reckon we can achieve the 30,000 homes?
So
the big question.
So we've got there's a national housing target, and we've got our share of that target that we've got to meet. All states and territories are working on this stuff, so we're not in isolation, and we're trying to, you know, if there's a good idea that happens in New South Wales, we'll adopt it. At the moment, we're leading the country 97%. In the first year of the National Housing Accord, we've met 97% of the target. That's promising to me because we still haven't actually achieved the zoning reform. It's before the Assembly at the moment, before the Parliament. We haven't achieved the transport-oriented development zoning that we want to do. So that we're pretty much achieving it at the moment, and those things haven't yet gone through. Once they go through, we're expecting a pickup in activity to happen. That's what's happened in other cities like Auckland that's put in place missing middle housing reforms, and we think we'll see that here as well. So I'm optimistic about it. There's obviously still a number of years to run, but we're trying to achieve a lot very quickly because we need to get the reforms in place now, because we still need the last couple of years to actually, you know, build the homes. The government can also play a role in terms of public housing. So we're a developer ourselves in terms of building new public homes and working with community.
You got 5,000 there you want to build, right?
5,000 affordable and social. So some of that will be in the community housing sector, and then 1,000 public homes. And we just had a reform go through in the Assembly in the last sitting week of the year in December to streamline the delivery of those public homes because they were being held up in ACAT in third-party appeals that was holding them up for a year, and we've managed to remove third-party appeals from both community and public housing. So that's a really important reform now as we get on and build those homes so that they're not held up. But there's a range of other things we'll need to do in the planning reform space as well. So New South Wales at the moment is looking at exempting all development, housing development up to 5 stories from a development application, just to get them through and those homes built quicker. So they still have to go through building approval, but not if they're what's called complying development, they'll be able to be built. So we're looking at that, and that is something that we'll look to adopt for the lower risk kind of missing middle housing development in Canberra, and that's a reform that we'll try and take forward next year. So there's a few reforms that are still going through that will contribute to this task.
That's where I like to sit on the complying development. I like to try and build within the regulations to stay away from the DAs and other people that can potentially have a say on what you're building. Build with inside that, and then it's a fast track, and you get going and get stuff happening, you know, sooner rather than later, because no one wants to sit around for 12 months waiting for a house to be built, you know. And I think we just need to get things happening and get things going. So I'm excited for that.
Yeah, there's a few things that one of the productivity reforms that we're working on at the moment, again, that will come forward next year is around exempt development. So that's sort of that complying development typically applies to single detached dwellings at the moment, and also a range of other non-habitable structures. But what we know is that whilst you can get an exempt declaration for the single detached dwellings if they don't necessarily fully comply with the rules under the Planning Act, but that doesn't apply to the non-habitable structures at the moment. And so we know that there's a need to provide more flexibility in the building system. So we're going to look at whether we can get that exempt declaration pathway for some of those other structures that people want to build to make their home livable and support the construction industry and, of course, the broader economy at the same time. So that will just give the opportunity, I think, to get things through the system more quickly within 10 days, for example, rather than necessarily having to wait for longer.
A thought just popped into my head as well. You're on a Peking duck. Do you want to talk to me about that? How did you get onto that?
Safia.
Yeah. How did you get on that?
Both great Canberra bands.
Both great Canberra, yeah. How did you get in there?
Music
video.
Yeah, look, Canberra's a small place, and you know everyone knows everyone through the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon sort of thing. But look, I worked with a a videographer or film production manager through my previous job before I came into the Assembly, working for Peabody Early Childhood Australia. And he was working on stuff on educational programs at our workplace, but was also working on film clips for music, including with Safia. They were doing a film clip for one of their songs, "You Are the One." They did it in Deakin, and had a lot of special effects as well. But
with the smoke and stuff.
I was the man with briefcase in that film clip. If you see it, and it was an enjoyable experience. I think it only took us 3 takes to do the whole thing, but it was it was an enjoyable experience. But I think I don't really have a future in acting, to be honest.
I don't know why I just thought of that, but that's cool. That's so cool. Well, did you obviously met Safia and all of that?
I don't think I have actually met them.
Oh, you haven't met them?
Yeah, I don't know. I think they came by to sort of see the clip, but they weren't necessarily starring in the clip. They had actors that were sort of performing the main roles. So but it was a good experience to be involved. Everyone came in. Everyone was a volunteer. It was a real local event.
Yeah, nice. All right, back to the heavy stuff. From your perspective, what does a successful planning system look like?
Look, one where we do achieve an abundance of housing for Canberrans that need it, but we want it well built as well. And part of the work that had been done prior to me becoming planning minister was around trying to make sure we've got a planning system that's outcomes focused. But what that really means is having good design at the centre of the system, and not overly prescriptive because everyone has a different subjective view about what they would like to see in their own home and how it's designed. But so providing those sort of broad design parameters, but not being absolutely prescriptive about what colour of paint people should be using on their home, all that sort of stuff. So we want a system that delivers housing that is well designed. There's more work to do there. I think at the moment, the fact that we've been prohibiting missing middle housing for so long, I just think that has become untenable in the city. And there'll be a number of people that disagree with me on that point. But we really do need to change, and I think that's where the planning system can come in supporting that type of development. So,
well, that's another hard part about your job, though. Yeah. You make these decisions, and whatever decision you make, there's going to be people that are upset.
Yeah.
I see some of the comments on some posts on Instagram, and they're about missing middle and things like that. Oh, we're losing the bush capital, and no, I think we're just growing as a city. Yeah. Like, we have more people that want to live here because it's so good. I think the essence of the city will always be there, as Burley Griffin has designed it, and we have a beautiful lake. I think we just want to accommodate more people.
Yeah, look, you're never going to get 100% of people agreeing with something all of the time. But I have actually been blown away at the support that the missing middle housing reforms have had, and they haven't received a huge amount, as much backlash as I perhaps anticipated. But there's more zoning reform to come, and whether that's rezoning around shopping centres and around light rail and rapid bus stops. So I expect that there'll be different views from the community coming through, and we need to hear that. And there may be changes that we need to make to some of this stuff to accommodate it. But we're really clear, at the election. I specifically sought a mandate at the election by having a really specific policy platform on housing with this zoning reform articulated, because I wanted us to be able to get support for it at the election. And so the conversation now is not about if we're going to build this housing near transport stops or shopping centres, but how we actually build it, which is I think a more constructive discussion around what design requirements should be in place and those sorts of things to be able to achieve the best outcome for the people who will be living in these new homes. So, and then same with the construction industry, is like hearing from them about how we actually make this work. Because the last thing I want to have is these zoning reforms go through and then they're not taken up by the construction industry because it's not feasible or there's too many barriers in place.
Yeah, again, good leadership there by listening to all the people around you and actually just making stuff happen.
Yeah.
And a big reason I wanted to have you on the podcast was to, initially when I spoke to you at the start of the year, I was like, am I even going to get a meeting with the minister, and I was really impressed to be able to sit down with you. Really, I felt really underprepared actually, and then do you actually listen to everything that I had to say, and then you pushed back on a couple of things, and then it was more focused on, all right, now what do we need to do to move forward?
Yeah.
So yeah, I really like the way you went about that, and I like the way that you've gone about, bringing in all of this new stuff and looking at, how we get these 30,000 homes built. Like, I think it's really fantastic.
There is, as we discussed it when we had that meeting, there's a political reality to it, and I'm pretty pragmatic about that. We've got an assembly that has basically two pathways to get legislation or policy supported. One's through the Liberal Party, one's through the Greens, or getting them both to everyone to agree. And we're going to need to work through that. There's different tranches of reform that are coming forward in different areas, and I'm trying to get as much of it through as I can. But ultimately, it will need the support of one of the political parties to be able to get it done. Last sitting week, I got the Territory Priority Projects Bill to support the community and public housing, to have streamlined approval pathways. I worked with the Greens to get that one done. It wasn't supported by the Libs, unfortunately. There'll be other stuff that we'll need to work with, the Libs on if the Greens can't support it, and we'll try and get as much through as we can. And we'll see what we can do. But it's.
So these are the roadblocks you deal with. You can't just wave your hand and go, fix that now, bang, away we go.
Yeah, I wish I could do that, but we work in a democracy, and there's a lot of scrutiny around this stuff, as there should be. It's big reform that we're talking about. But ultimately, some of this stuff has to go through the Assembly and actually be approved. And so the zoning reform might be fantastic, and everyone in the community supports the construction industry, but then it actually has to go to the Assembly. And so that's where the construction industry can help, actually, in terms of being able to communicate that this actually will make a real difference to what they're doing, whether it's building new homes or new decks or whatever it may be. And having that engagement with other members of the Assembly, not just the government as well.
That's a tricky one.
But you've also got day jobs, and you're actually building stuff.
No, what I mean is, like, you're trying to do something that's going to benefit people, and you've got to go to the Assembly and then try and get that through there. Like, that's politics, though, right?
Yeah. It took a year of negotiation to get the Territory Priority Projects Bill through. It was a lot of work. But we got there. And
is that just negotiation and discussions between all the different parties and that sort of stuff?
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's your profession.
That's part of that's part of the job.
That's part of the job.
It's an interest. It keeps it interesting. But when we're really clear about what we're trying to achieve, which is more homes, there's a strong sort of moral element there. We want what we were talking about, the most vulnerable people in our community having shelter. Ultimately, that won the day. I didn't think we'd have support at the start of the year, but we managed to get there.
Yeah. That's I'm just thinking about that, like with me and what I do. Like, I put a set of plans in, and then, if it gets rejected, I go and start talking to different people and change things around and get it through. There'd be sort of similar there, but there's a political element behind that, which is, makes it even more difficult.
Yeah. Well, politics is everywhere, but my job's particularly political. Because we're literally having to go and vote in the Assembly on these things and debate the issues, which is a good thing.
Yeah. Do you think that Canberra has a workforce issue, a policy issue, a land release issue, or all three?
I think all of those are challenges. Like we discussed, land release, scarcity of land is a challenge. Bringing it to market in a reasonable period of time. Workforce is a big challenge. Like I was a minister for training before. And there was a lot of apprentices going through, particularly just during and just after COVID in the construction industry. That's dropped off a lot. There's a lot more work we need to do to attract apprentices into construction roles. We've increased the training subsidy to 90% in the budget in June. Hope that'll make a difference, because it'll take a bit of pressure off the host employer. They won't have to pay for as much of the cost of the training for their apprentice, but it is challenging, I know, for construction businesses to take on apprentices. They're not particularly productive in their first, year or two, and they do need that mentoring support.
They do. That's tricky. But look, any funding we can get is definitely appreciated. But I think we do need to. I talk on every podcast about how we attract more, not just young people, but just people to the construction industry, because we seem to be losing a lot. And I feel like construction is undergoing a bit of a culture shift at the moment. We're being a little bit more understanding, and we're I think being a bit more supportive. The old style of, just get into it and get it done is sort of moving out a little bit. It's like, how can we support you to do a better job now?
Yeah, I see that change, and I see it particularly represented in terms of the number of women who are working in the industry. And we've tried to support that both through government procurement, so requiring a certain number of women on government projects, on the major infrastructure projects. CIT Woden campus, good example of that. We've also just funded some more schools to participate in the sort of women in construction program. So a bit of a taster for young women who are at high school to be able to find out what it means to work in the construction industry, and actually, I think, potentially go out off their campus. They'll do theory and some of that work on campus, but actually go off campus and have an opportunity to go out and work on a construction site. Like that
Joe Farrell?
Yeah, certainly there's been some construction industry leaders that have been really pushing for that for a number of years, and there's further opportunities there to get a better balance there, because it's an untapped, like if we're ignoring 50% of the population as a sort of source of workers who could be contributing, that's a problem. So that's part of it, and that will hope, I think, just having more women will help drive a cultural change. But there has been a cultural change necessary to attract them in the first place, make sure that they and their parents, if they're young women, feel safe that they can work in that without facing the risks that may have been present in the past.
We just got to keep talking about it, and we've got to keep it top of mind. And I think the more women we can get into construction, the better. I think you talking and having this top of mind, all of these construction things and the productivity agenda. The other thing that it does is it builds confidence in the consumer and the client, in that the government is looking at making construction easier and cheaper and better. So I feel confident about go and spend money with a builder. Was that an intention, or is that just a?
Well, I think that goes to sort of what we hope to get out of this in terms of it's an economic reform. It's not just a reform to support more housing, which is sort of a social outcome. So we absolutely understand that for businesses working in the construction industry, you are taking the risk. You're putting the investment and capital into building whether it's new homes or other structures. And if you get held up, whether it's in the planning system or anywhere else, that creates uncertainty, creates delay for yourselves. It creates extra cost. And for the client, they're also experiencing those factors as well. And so we hope to be able to avoid some of that stuff. Now, that will mean some trade-offs, and that might mean that there's less appeals to ACAT from the community that are permitted, or it might mean that they don't have a say in certain things that they in a way that they've had in the past with the ability to block development, for example. But I think when we're really clear about the outcome that we can achieve, which is getting that outcome of 30,000 new homes and growing the business community in our shopping centres, for example, then we can achieve a lot and get a better balance.
I've seen the effects of that come in pretty much like very, very quickly. I think August and September were the busiest months that we've had in the office. I mean, I think we quoted over $10 million worth of work, and that's pools, decks, pergolas, smaller renovations, like that is ginormous for us. So that's been really fantastic, and I feel like this target you've put again of 30,000 homes, that we'll start to see that come in next year, and I really reckon. I've been saying it all year. I think everything's gonna pick up in the back end of this year, which it has, and I think that growth is then going to be exponential, and we'll really get some momentum going.
I think part of it, like there's always going to be cycles in the market. Interest rates are a large driver of that, and they were pretty high in the inflationary period that followed the pandemic. They've come down a bit, and inflation's still a bit sticky. But at least there's been a number of interest rate decreases over the last year. I think that's now we're seeing a pick up in the market, in the broader construction industry, which is good. So we'll see how things go next year. But the idea of, from my position in government, is those sort of broader macro factors. What we want to do is not stop things from happening through our own regulation. That has nothing to do with the broader market. Let's try and pull back, make sure that we've got the regulation right, and allow the market to do its thing, even though it's subject to those sort of cycles. We don't want to be the one that's holding things back.
When are all these changes coming in, and when are we going to see that this stuff take effect? Because things in government tend to take a little bit of time. They can be frustrating as a builder. Do you have a timeline on these things?
Yeah, look, we've got a range of different things going on. I've tried to break them into tranches so that we can at least get some stuff out the door and done sooner while we're still working on some of the other reforms, rather than doing sort of one giant piece of legislation, for example, one giant zoning change that could then also ignite opposition from a range of different angles and make the whole thing untenable to pass through the Assembly. So I'm trying to break them up into bite-sized chunks, and that hopefully allows the community and construction industry the ability to engage effectively on each individual part, and makes it a bit easier for everyone. So missing middle housing reforms middle of next year. We've got 2 major plan amendments on transit-oriented development in the inner north, Thoroughbred Park Precinct and Downer and Watson. Their consultations sort of just wrapping up on both of those at the moment. We're expecting those to potentially get through in the middle of next year as well. The first tranche of the construction productivity agenda, first half of next year. Legislation to support potential more forms of exempt development, and the pattern book, which we've committed to as well, these pre-approved government designs that can be built more quickly. We're expecting hopefully in the first half of next year. So there's quite a bit happening. There's more to come beyond that with the Southern Gateway transit-oriented development, which is sort of around the middle of the year for consultation there, but probably will take another year to get through. And then there'll be zoning reforms that follow that. So there'll be a whole range of different reforms coming forward, and encourage yourselves and others who might be listening to get involved in contributing to those and hopefully refining them so we get the best possible outcome.
So that's, you're just doing it bit by bit just to get it through quickly.
Yeah.
Or quicker.
Right. Well, and we may not get everything through, but at least we've got something through. And I think that's the approach that I'm taking. It's pragmatic. I'm trying to just deal with the issues that are coming forward. But we also need to prioritise that. And if there is something the construction industry is saying, hey, we need this done like now because this is really holding, we'll try and see whether we can prioritise that element ahead of other stuff.
Yeah, to get housing going, right?
Yeah.
A question I ask everyone that comes into the podcast is, what is your leadership style?
I think I do really respect the advice that comes forward from the public service. Canberra's a city of public servants, and I think they understand, the level of expertise that is in their policy experts working on different things. I really respect that, and I've tried to develop a culture where I receive advice from the directorate, and I'll have my own different ideas and views on things, and I'll also sort of feed that in. I really want that sort of exchange of ideas. So not just coming from one direction, not just top down or not just from bottom down, but having the genuine exchange, and that hopefully creates a culture where public servants feel like they can actually raise issues and problems as well. Because some people, unfortunately, may think that with some people that they can't raise a problem because they want to present a positive face all the time. But I'm happy to have that discussion, happy to hear what the issues are. Try and engage with the industry as well, because I think that's an important thing. And I know that the directorate may not always get it right, and so we've got to have that engagement as well. I've tried to be open to that. I'm not a micromanager. Some people I think probably have thought I was in the past, but compared to some of the other members that I know, I'm certainly probably not sort of engaging in the micro detail. But where I quite frankly, my workload doesn't allow for that to happen. And if I do that, I'm probably not actually assisting the process. I'm probably hindering it as well. So I'm really grateful that we've got such great people working in government that we can rely on to get really good policy and legislation up. So
collaborative effort, get the right people,
right people is really important. And so
basically like a business.
Yeah, exactly. And so trying to work with them there. Now there are things that go wrong, and that I think part of it is while that's always unfortunate, my inclination has never been to turn around and sack people or do something or go after people, go after the public service because they've made a mistake. Like, mistakes happen. It's how you manage that. And I've just tried to sort of instill a culture of learning from those issues. And that's particularly been the case. I've in 10 years almost 10 years as a member of Assembly, not everything has gone right, and we've had to go back and go, what did we get it wrong? Could we do more in the planning and design stage to do things better for next time, and try and maybe change things? We've had a big change to the way that we deliver ICT projects with the establishment of Digital Canberra to try and build capability. So I've really tried to focus on that building capability element, get people with the skills and expertise to be able to deliver what we're trying to do.
How does it actually work? So you're obviously looking after these different departments, and then do you elect the top guy in there, or how does that all? The top guy or girl in there, I should say.
Yeah, look, the Director General is directly responsible to the ministers, but they are all
they report to you.
They report to the ministers, and often they'll have multiple ministers to report to within each directorate, and then they are directly responsible for the officials that work underneath them. So there's a lot of work, and then obviously the Chief Minister also has a particularly defined role. He's obviously the head of the government. We're responsible to him as ministers as well. And then, of course, we're all responsible to the Parliament as well. So there's those levels of accountability there. And the Chief Minister, though, was the one that led the most recent changes to what we call machinery of government, which is basically merging directors' departments together to be able to drive housing outcomes. And he also created Digital Canberra to deliver the complex ICT projects that government needs to do. He established Infrastructure Canberra, which previously didn't exist, again, to build capability and expertise in the delivery of the major infrastructure projects for the territory, which had previously been separated in different government departments. So
more continuity, essentially.
Yeah, so
to get things done faster and easier.
Yeah, and things will need to change in government from time to time to be able to deliver on the priorities of the day. So we all work together to try and deliver that.
So do Icon and Evo, do they report to you then?
So there's a different relationship, with them, and they are territory owned. Well, Icon is a territory owned corporation, and they have an interest in Evo Energy together with a private company, Gemini. And so there's a different relationship with them compared to just a standard government department. There are two shareholders, which is the Minister for Finance and the Minister for Environment and Energy, Suzanne Orr. And so they participate in shareholder meetings and AGMs. But we still engage with Icon reasonably directly, especially through the City and Environment Directorate, who are working often with Icon through the planning system in addressing, and government projects as well. And it's always a bit of a challenge because they've obviously got their corporate requirements that they have to adhere by, and government has its own set of priorities, and we're trying to match the two. And then obviously the private sector's got its own priorities and deadlines that it needs to meet as well. And so we're trying to bring them into a lot of discussions around planning and building reform as much as we can, because that has been, we've noted in our own projects, that's often a cause of delay in getting, approvals for some of the water assets and changes to utilities, those sorts of things.
That's why I wanted to bring it up, because I've noticed, I spoke to you earlier in the year about it, and I got a phone call from someone at Icon, and he basically said, look, are these all your issues, Dave? It basically comes down to communication. You just want to be communicated to, and you want to be on the same team. And I was like, yep, that's all we need to do, and I haven't had an issue since.
Okay.
And it has been a mark change.
Yeah.
And I really appreciated, one, them owning, hey, we could do this better, and two, it just comes down to communication.
Yeah.
And for me, and the way that, I don't know what it was, that just that little shift from them has just made things so much easier. And I feel like that's a really positive sign for things to come.
Yeah. Yeah, look, 90% of the problems in government, I think, are about communication or communication problems. And so that is certainly something that can be done. But I hope they weren't suggesting you were the one that was not communicating. I think they also need to make sure that they're communicating effectively with industry about their expectations, and also there's a genuine discussion to be had about resourcing as well, within Icon to be able to support some of the planning and building processes as well. And that's something we will continue to discuss.
The communication was basically, look, we get so many applications, and when we reject your application, it's just because we get so many. And if you can tighten these couple of things up, then we can, or if you've got a problem, just call me, and we can. I'll pull up your application. I'll tell you what you need to do to amend it, and then we're good to go.
Yeah.
And literally since that phone call, we haven't had an issue. And like, I've just call them up. Hey, what do I need to do to get this through? Yep, change this, add this onto the plans. Good to go. Yeah. That has just been such a massive shift, because you can get caught in that referral loop that I've mentioned to you as well. You put it into Icon, you get rejected there, but then you got to resubmit it to Evo, and to resubmit it to all these different people. And I've noticed the attitude shift is really the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, I think that sort of endless feedback loop issue, and then not being able to get through the process, and then you make an amendment, you have to go through the process again. I mean, it's something that we've identified in the review of the planning and building system processes, is that there can be times where something needs to go back through some of these referral entities up to 6 times. That's not good enough. It delays projects from being built. It's not necessarily adding value. By bringing the departments together into City Environment Directorate, a lot of those referral entities were in those directorates. So we're actually looking at bringing them together into one single sort of, part of it into one single unit, which is called Development Solutions. And they will sort of be a sort of communications, point of communication with the proponent of a project, but also with some of the referral entities that are in the directorate to be able to get some of that feedback much more quickly so that things can move through. Now, Icon and Evo will still sit separately, but we're trying to engage them.
There'll be tree protection and TCCS.
TCCS, the transport elements and asset acceptance and all of those sorts of areas that may contribute, heritage, all of those areas. So hopefully that will speed up that, what is an important process, because we need feedback from some parts of the department around those issues, but it needs to happen in a coordinated and streamlined way, and we're hoping to achieve that through this new Development Solutions branch.
I've really liked the sound of that. That's fantastic. I've got a smile on my face.
Well, there's still more work to do to make sure it stood up and effective, but it's that culture of trying to actually find solutions to allow development to happen, but in a well-designed and sustainable way.
Yeah, because we can do this better, and I think as a government, you want to do things that better as well, and we just need to be on the same page, reading from the same book, and we need to communicate to each other in a way that helps you and it helps me, and then we can keep moving.
Sounds good.
Do you need a drink of water?
I'm all good. Yeah,
you're all good?
All good. Yep.
What's been I've lost my train of thought now. What's a win you're proud of, even if it didn't get a lot of attention?
Look, I think actually getting this Territory Priority Projects bill through the Assembly to enable public and community housing to be built is a big win. And it got a little bit of attention, but it's something that has been such a thorn in the side of these particularly community housing providers for such a long time, where there's been really quite divisive and pretty mean campaigns run against, what the future residents of these new homes would be, that I actually think it has not been about the housing itself or the design of the home. It has been all about the tenants that were going to go into the homes. I hope that will just shut down that kind of divisive, the divisive nature of those appeals that were occurring and those campaigns that were run against that kind of development. And we'll still have community input into the design of the buildings, but it won't be able to be appealed, and with the intention that those projects are held up or not built. So that's been a big one for me. But yeah, getting light rail stage 2A delivered will be a big one. It's still a couple of years away, but it's well under construction. Tracks are being laid sort of as early as January, so we're really excited about that. The transition of the bus system to electric hasn't necessarily got a huge amount of attention, but as of this week, we have 106 electric buses running on the road, more per capita than every other city in Australia. So,
is that in Woden, the charging station for that?
Yeah, largest purpose-built electric bus depot in Australia is in Woden.
I drive past it nearly every day.
Yeah,
it's a smick-looking building.
Yeah, so going back to the thing, I built that bus depot.
Yeah, that's it.
Had a bit of help as well from, but like that had bespoke design components with the drop-down charging. People are coming to see it from right around Australia and overseas because they're so interested in what we've done there, and they want to roll out something similar in their own city. So I think it's something we can be really proud of. But the benefit wasn't just to house the electric buses and to charge them. It freed up like hundreds of kilometres worth of buses that could be used on the network. So we had increased the frequency of bus services around the city because we could eliminate dead running in the system because of that depot. It's well located and could serve central Canberra. So there's more work to do there, and there's going to be a lot of disruption in the city over the next 2 years with the NCA bridge works. But those kind of investments have made a real difference to public transport.
Big win there.
Yeah.
How do you deal with the public criticism and all that negativity that comes your way? Because you seem like, to me, you're just always cool, calm, collected, all over it.
Look, when I first entered politics, I had a pretty good piece of advice given, which is to put on your armour, and like metaphorical armour. Basically, you're going to get criticised. You need to be prepared for that and not take it to heart, because people are going to disagree with you. That's the nature of the job. And so I'm happy to engage. It's not for the faint-hearted, again, the job, but it's one of those areas where you expect to have debate, you expect to have differences of opinion, and you just need to, I guess, roll with that. Of course, there have been some instances, unfortunately, where it's gone beyond, respectful debate. But most of the time, Canberrans are pretty good in engaging with their local politician. They've got high expectations of them, and even the opposition at times when they've gone personal, it's not particularly nice, but that's the game. Yeah,
better you than me. Definitely. What's been the hardest call you've had to make in your portfolio so far, do you think?
Yeah, look, that's a difficult one. I think the budget for me was particularly challenging as a new treasurer delivering my first budget. It was a really difficult budget where we had massive increase in health costs and demand in the system, and we had to pour in $1.19 billion extra funding just to do what we're currently doing, as well as some more elective surgeries and so forth, just because the cost had gone up and huge numbers were, accessing our emergency departments. And that meant that health was taking up a huge amount of the budget. We were going into deficit, and we needed to do something around revenue. Now, no one likes charging new taxes, fees and charges, but that's what we had to do. So we made a difficult decision there, and I wear that and take responsibility as treasurer. We also had to, making some pretty difficult decisions around expenditure growth in the public service, and to try and limit the growth. It'll still grow, but it won't grow as fast, and that means we need to
be more efficient.
And that means doing difficult things, using the existing resources that we have more effectively, reprioritising those, and that is a change for both the people in the directorates and for the broader community in the assembly that they need to accept. But we've got to do a lot for the city, but we can't. We have to make sure that the budget is on a sustainable path at the same time. And so we made a lot of those difficult decisions in the budget, and that was probably the most challenging thing I've had to do as a minister.
Yeah, it's like running a business. You've got to have a financial forecast, and you've got to make tough decisions, and you have to get the most out of the people you've got working with you.
Yeah,
like it's a pretty simple equation, really. When you
Yeah.
high level it,
Yeah.
you know, it's always easy when you're up there.
Yeah, I guess I've got the added challenges that the accountability mechanisms with scrutiny, the public,
Yeah.
and who have certain expectations. They've got a very high level of expectation around service delivery, and so it's difficult to drop that back, and we accepted that. That's why we decided that we would have to ask both households and business to make a greater contribution through revenue measures to the cost of delivering those services. But then we also had to ask the Assembly to support the measures that we were taking as well, and they didn't support all of them. Thankfully, we got the budget through with most of what we had put forward, but there's going to need to be ongoing work there. It's not just going to be all done in one budget. So we've managed to charter a course on a more sustainable path over the forward estimates of the budget, but there's going to be a lot more work that's required, particularly as new challenges and shocks confront us as well. So, in the past we've had pandemics, we've had Mr. Fluffy, we've had all those sorts of things. We need to make sure that the budget is ready to be able to manage future shocks.
It's just thinking about it, like there's just so much involved in all of that. Yeah, it's overwhelming. Actually, I've said it a few times. You've got such a big job. Do you think there should be a standalone construction minister, someone to just look after construction?
So we did have that in the last assembly. Minister Fassarotti was responsible for sustainable building, sustainable development, and she had a range of other portfolios as well, environment and so forth. So there have been different ways. I think it does make sense, though, at the moment to have planning and building together. The two systems are, they're part of one system, and I think making sure that the goals are correct around new housing and having that priority, I think, is particularly important at the moment. So having those things together really makes sense.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Ideally, we'd only have one portfolio. I mean, in New South Wales, a lot of ministers only have one portfolio, and obviously that allows them to focus. But
that was the analogy I was looking at. They've got one construction manager that goes around, and it's almost like he waves his stick and goes, do better to all the different councils. But we don't have that in the ACT. Yeah. It's just government and then everyone,
Yeah, that's right. So the larger jurisdictions can afford to do that. We've got to try and work as efficiently as we can. But
and the only real resources we've got here are land, people. Is there anything else? That's pretty much it, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And we're trying to diversify the economy as much as we can. We've got, the universities are particularly, so the knowledge capital element there as well, which is really important. But we do rely on people, and for taxation, we rely on land as well. So,
keeps the roads looking nice.
Yeah, there's still a bit of work to do with the Commonwealth on making sure we get our fair share of funding, particularly around our population. They haven't been acknowledging that our population is at the level that it is currently because
You think we get left out of that a lot?
Yeah. Well, I think at the moment it's about an undercount of 21,000. That's actually that's tens of millions of dollars a year and hundreds of millions over a couple of years, and that really greatly affects our ability to deliver services to Canberrans. And the reason for that is because the population in Canberra is transient, and when people come here, they don't change their Medicare address, and that's what the population data is based on.
Right.
And so if you want to do the ACT government a favour and the community generally, make sure you update your Medicare address on the app.
Yeah, never thought about that. Well, Kurt out there, he's from Victoria, and I know he hasn't updated anything, so we'll have to get into him about that. Modular and prefab construction was mentioned in the recent reforms. Do you see that being a big role in Canberra's future? Or
look, it's a really exciting opportunity. It's not going to deliver all of the new homes that we need, but there's been some really good examples already where it's sped up the delivery of new homes, particularly through prefabricated walls. There's been the development in Watson for Housing ACT, where the total construction time was 12 weeks on site, which is pretty amazing. And that was I think that was using a prefabricated concrete wall system. There's actually some really good businesses in Canberra that do some of this prefabricated, structural insulated wall systems, but also some businesses that are building the homes themselves. So in a factory, not affected by the weather, but there are some challenges that industry faces in scaling up. They're not necessarily treated the same under both the planning and building systems, but also by the financial institutions. Like the whole structure of loans is built around these milestones that are achieved on site.
Slab, frame.
That's right.
Yeah, lock up.
And so we've had some engagement with the big banks and lenders around this, and they are looking how they can deliver products that could achieve support for these modular home designs. There are challenges with transport costs as well, especially if they're coming from interstate. Some of the materials, it will cost to transport the products. That can be difficult. But our opportunity locally, and we've committed to do this under the national competition policy, is look at how we can update our regulations to support those homes so they've got a level playing field. They can get through the systems that we need to. And then use Housing ACT, who's building new homes, trying to have a certain number of them that are using these prefabricated or modular designs. And we want to sort of test and show the broader community what's possible, because it's also the market when people are wanting to build a new home.
Price is a factor.
At the moment, they can be more expensive, which is surprising. But I think that will change when the industry scales up, and when they can deliver in price parity or even cheaper. That'll make a difference. But also just awareness of that the products are out there and exist, and that we've got great local manufacturers that can actually build it for them, and getting builders to become familiar with the materials that are available as well. One of the companies I visited recently, it's run by Elvin Group. Out of the old Canberra winery. They've got that whole Canberra winery is now a factory for this sort of prefabricated compressed foam walls, as well as what they're building out there in terms of new homes. A lot of those new homes are being purchased for use in remote communities in Queensland and elsewhere, not necessarily in the ACT, but we're building them here and they need to be shipped.
It's another lever we can pull, though.
Yeah.
What else as builders do we need to do better?
Look, I think there's been a few reports recently, Productivity Commission and Grattan Institute, looking at the productivity of the construction sector, saying it hasn't changed a lot in 30 years. And so there's an opportunity, I guess, to adopt some of those new technologies, new what they call modern methods of construction. So not necessarily something that's fully built in a factory and then transported out on site, but certain elements might be. There's a bit of work going on the Cooperative Research Centre, which is looking at basically setting up like a standardised set of parts that can be used in a sort of construction system to allow that kind of modular design to happen on site. So there's a bit of work there that requires new parts manufacturers and supply chain to be developed. So it's a big piece of work that's happening nationally, because ultimately in ACT we are working in the broader sort of New South Wales construction market. There are builders working across both sides of the border, and so to actually tap into the broader, having a full market development of this kind of technology would be useful. And getting people, obviously skills will be part of that as well, and skilling up people to be able to work with it.
Yeah, we got to be employing more young people and getting them into construction, and more people. I think if we can bring some people across from the public service, pinch a few people off you, and then everywhere else. And I think showing people what the lifestyle is like in construction, I think is going to be a big benefit as well.
Yeah.
If we go back to what's your long-term vision for Canberra? Yeah. Not the political version, just your long-term.
Yeah, look, I think I've benefited personally from just the great quality of life in Canberra, great schooling, education, access to healthcare services. It's a great place to raise my daughter and have a family. And I want to, that to other people to be able to benefit from that. And, I've been able to get a great job through the education that I've received and be able to, support my family, but also to purchase a home, those sorts of things. I want those opportunities to be available to other people. And that's why housing has been such a focus, because that, unfortunately, that housing dream is escaping a lot of people, particularly people who are working, good jobs, solid jobs, but may just not be able to afford it because it has become more expensive, and there isn't necessarily the supply of the types of homes that people want to live in. Particularly if they're having a family, they may not want to live in an apartment. They want something a bit bigger. So there's that, and also just making sure that we retain everything else about the city that we love, the character of the place in terms of access to recreational amenity, all of that sort of stuff. So I think that can be achieved, but there's a lot of work to do there, and that requires change, and that's exactly what we're working on. We can't if we don't do something. So if we don't change, we are going to lose some of those elements that people rely on. That's why I don't. Like can be some groups in Canberra, NIMBY groups, that are arguing against change on the basis that they want to keep, for example, the bush capital and the livability of the city. But I am of the view that if we don't change, we will lose those things, the things that people hold dear about the city. And so that's the approach that, I've taken in supporting things like light rail, which is about, keeping us to make sure we continue to be a place that's easy to get around. All those things we enjoy about Canberra, it's about achieving that, because we don't want to be stuck in congestion in 10 years, 20 years' time.
Yeah, it'd be nice if these groups would be a little bit more understanding and ask questions and, I guess, try and talk across the divide instead of just throwing stones and trying to make things a bit more difficult than they need to be.
My door's always open to have discussions with the groups. I have an environment, transport and planning forum that meets, where we have a lot of the groups that, residents groups that come and talk about planning issues together with the broader construction industry. I think that's helpful to actually get a mix of different views and dialogue on some of the issues. But, there'll always be differences of opinion, but I'm, open to hearing that. But, I just want to be clear about when we go to an election, for example, we've sought a specific mandate to do things. And when we've got that mandate from the broader community, we really need to make it clear, I think, to some of those groups that
you've been elected for a reason.
We've got that. Yeah, we've got that mandate. Now we want we want to work constructively with you, but on the how, not if.
Now, a question I have to ask you, apparently, LVC, any changes?
Yeah, so a big issue that always comes up, existed since the 70s in the ACT, a form of
lease variation
charges. And so, look, it currently exists in the ACT, 75% of market uplift, but there are also the codified charges that apply to some of the smaller residential developments. This is one opportunity around the productivity agenda to streamline the system. Leasehold's unique to the ACT, leasehold system in Australia, and that can also present a barrier for people because they have to change their lease to do certain things. We're looking at whether we can make that easier. One of the suggestions that's come forward from the Planning Institute, which is something that we will seriously consider, is whether we decouple lease variation from the development application process. So you need a DA at the moment to change your lease. Could we actually make it a bit simpler, particularly if you're wanting to add an additional dwelling? There will be a charge that's still attached to that in the future, but what we're interested in is making it giving greater certainty to the sector. We still need a contribution back to the budget to be able to fund the services that support, for example, the new home that someone might be building on site. But I think there are some things that we can do. So we have had an exemption that's currently in place until the middle of next year, and that'll be a point that we'll be looking at to look at, well, what's next for LVC, whether we bring in changes to support missing middle homes and provide an incentive for that. One of the other things that people have been asking for is exemptions from LVC if they're a large developer that's delivering a precinct scale development, if they're delivering community facilities or recreational facilities.
So if they do that, they get a bit of a
discount. At the moment, they wouldn't, but there's precedent for it in the ACT. There's a community centre in Civic, which was developed by the owner of the Canberra Centre in the past and handed back to government. This is actually a common practice in New South Wales through voluntary developer agreements. There's a framework that's been set up in New South Wales for those assets to be handed back to councils or the state government. So
win-win then.
Yeah, it's win-win. That's right. But it has to be things that are a genuine need for the community. So we're going to look at developing a framework around that. And then for the larger larger developments that often get caught up in the valuation system, that can be quite costly and delay projects. So we're looking at whether there's a way to use codification as a way of streamlining that process for the larger scale developments that wouldn't then bog them down in valuations. That costs government as well, and time and resources within government to engage with that valuation process. Is there a way of actually streamlining it and codifying it so everyone's got certainty about what taxes need to be paid associated with a certain type of development?
I think the argument is if you can bring it down a little bit, then we can do more stuff because it's more feasible.
There's always going to be developments that are on the cusp of feasibility.
Yeah.
And so regardless of whether you drop it or increase it, and part of it is just getting the balance right. We want to encourage development to happen, but we also want a contribution back to the community for the services that people will be accessing in a new home, and the potential infrastructure upgrades that are required, often directly around the development as well, whether that's around utilities or transport or whatever, public realm improvements. And so there's a balance to be struck, and we're prepared to examine that. And I think the missing middle is the priority at the moment. So we'll look at that first, the contributed assets element of community and recreation facilities, but then looking at, have we got the balance right in terms of the current process for the larger scale developments and the valuation process. So there's a few things there. The other one is inclusionary zoning. So when we're running out of land in the territory to release for new public and community housing. And so leased land, private land, is going to need to be able to contribute to the task of building more social housing. So can we provide incentives through the tax system to encourage developers to supply a certain number of dwellings, as part of their precinct scale development? So we're looking at those options there as well, potentially having requirements as well around a certain number of social homes might need to be provided in a certain scale of development. So a carrot and stick approach potentially. Yeah.
We'll move on to the quickfire round now. Yep. Now, the quickfire round is never quickfire, so take as long as you want to answer any of these questions. We'll kick it off with, what's one tool you can't live without on a day-to-day basis?
iPad. I do a lot of signing, briefs and so forth, and we've pretty much eliminated paper, so that'd be it. Yeah. I'm not pushing paper, I'm pushing a screen.
Yeah, perfect. Good for the environment too. What's the biggest myth about politics you'd like to bust?
I think that we're, self-interested. I think that's probably, a view that's often put across about politicians. But I think most politicians, even from, the other political parties, I take the view that they're in it genuinely to make a difference. And, if you go up, a politician actually wants to engage with you, is interested in your views. So please don't be afraid of engaging with them.
Yeah, and I think you guys do a lot of door knocking, and I know that you do a lot of pop-up offices in Canberra, and and you're busy all the time. Like, I think people seem to have a misconception as well that you don't really do that much, which after meeting yourself and some of the other people is definitely wrong.
Yeah.
What does a day generally look like for you?
Look, there's a lot of meetings, and both for me as a minister, that's a lot of cabinet meetings and subcommittees, particularly as treasurer, I'm part of the expenditure review committee. So that's outside of a sitting week. People often think that sitting weeks, that's our work. Actually, for me as a minister, most of my work happens outside of sitting weeks when we're actually in cabinet making decisions on things, meeting with members of the community, developing policy and legislation. Communication is a big part of the role as well. Like that is a critical part of being a politician, is communicating effectively on what the government is doing. And also listening. I think that's an important part of it. In a lot of the meetings, I'll just be listening to what people have to say and trying to take that into account in our policy making.
Yeah. One thing you'd fix instantly in the construction industry?
Look, if I could get the missing middle reforms through tomorrow, that would be excellent. Unfortunately, they are in a committee process that could take up to 6 months, but I'm trying to reduce the size of that inquiry so we can, in terms of the time frame. I've asked the committee to reconsider, but we'll see. But yeah, if we get that done, I think that would just be a major benefit to the city in terms of providing that long-term supply of housing. It won't be overnight, but it will deliver, I think, the city that people really
you need to get that through the assembly still, or?
Yeah, it's got to go through a planning committee process. They'll make recommendations and then the government will respond to them and then put it to the final version to the assembly where it could be voted on. But the Assembly Committee inquiry will take a little bit longer than I hoped.
Yeah, okay. What's the best advice you've ever received?
I think it's probably been from a political perspective, nothing is, and this probably applies generally in people's life, nothing is ever as bad as it seems or as good as it seems.
That's a good one. I like that.
And I think that one, if you're in a bad situation, it's about having a bit of perspective. And the same if you thought you've had a massive win, celebrate, but don't overdo it.
Don't overdo it. Yeah, I like that. Because when you take a step back, the bad days are never as bad as what you think, and the good days are probably the same. And somewhere in the middle is where the actual truth is.
Absolutely.
And all the different people I've spoken to throughout the podcast, they'll talk about their frustrations and then talk about their wins, and it always ends up somewhere in the middle, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
What advice would you give your younger self?
Probably to go out and enjoy life, travel, play sport, all those things that are more difficult to do when you've got a child.
Yeah. What sports do you play?
Look, I do like golf, but I just can't contribute 5 hours every weekend when I've got a daughter. I'd be doing my partner a disservice. So I haven't been playing as much as I would usually do, but I tend to get out and run with the dog and instead to get my exercise.
Well, that's the next question. What's your favorite thing to do?
Yeah,
outside of politics.
That'd probably be it. But I game as well, both on PC and sort of board games and stuff as well.
Nice.
Like war games. So, but I like to read and do a few other things as well. But work does take up a bit of time.
Yeah, but you're going to need a fair bit of decompression time outside of that, because you're talking and listening all day. I get home sometimes and I'm just like, I don't want to talk to anyone. Going down the coast is something that's nice to do. So escaping for the weekend. I don't have the same issues as the Chief Minister, who is recognised by the entire community. I'm not necessarily recognised by everyone, but it is nice to get out of town every now and then to a place where there are many Canberrans anyway. Yeah, definitely. Who should we get on the podcast? Who's your recommendation?
I would certainly encourage you to speak to some of our planning officials, particularly,
I'd love to.
Yeah, particularly James Bennett, who's leading up the team that has not only delivered the missing middle housing reform work, but also some work on the productivity agenda, to talk in a bit more of the technical detail around some of those changes. There's a lot that's going to be happening in 2026, so there's more to be announced, and that's an opportunity, I think, to engage with some of that content.
Yeah, James is a really good operator. I'm excited, I think that'd be a great opportunity to catch up and talk more in detail about this stuff, because you're making decisions up here and they're more sort of the implementation and how it works, right?
Yeah, that's right. And we've got some people that really are experts in the technical detail of the planning and building systems, and so they're well placed to speak to you, and they're well placed to advise me about what we should be doing to improve the system.
When I first had the concept of doing this podcast, right, I sat down and I wrote a list of names. And at the very top of that list, I put your name down there. So I feel very thankful that you've come in, and it's been a crazy ride this year. This is episode number 27.
Wow.
I think we started in April. And I honestly thought I'd have to wait until like episode 50 to reach out to you, and you have the time. So I can't thank you enough for coming in, Minister, and giving up your time, especially in a very busy period of the year. So I appreciate that. Where can people follow the reforms and stay updated with what you're doing and what's happening?
Yeah, look, obviously they can follow me. I'll be updating through a range of different channels, but the planning website has a lot of information. We will be going out for various consultations and engagements through the Your Say, government's Your Say platform as well. So there's a lot of information there to look at. Fantastic.
And could you finish us up with a quote or an idea that keeps you centered or keeps you going on a tough day?
Gee, you've actually stumped me on that one.
Yes, I got you on one.
Yeah, I can't think of one off the top of my head. I'm going to be honest.
It's a tough question.
Yeah,
maybe we go back to it's never as good and it's never as bad.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good one for everyone. But no, I really appreciate the opportunity to come on the program. Haven't done many podcasts before, so thank you, and Merry Christmas to you and your team.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thanks.